Greetings, and welcome to Today in Trek, our show about what has, is, and will happen in the world of Trek. We're going to switch it up a bit today and focus on the premiere of Star Trek Section 31, which premiered on Paramount Plus on January 24th. However, those areas that aren't served by Paramount Plus will not get to see it until February 7th, when the movie will be shown on Sky Showtime. With that in mind, there's going to be spoilers. A lot of them. If you don't want to know about the movie in advance, then skip today's episode, because we're going to be talking movie details. With that in mind, let's get to it. We've talked a lot about the movie in the last few episodes, that it was an idea for a series pitched to Alex Kurtzman by Michelle Yeoh during the first seasons of Discovery, but due to COVID, the writer's strike, and Yeoh's winning an Academy Award for Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, the dynamic behind creating a series got shifted to making a movie. Of course, there has been a lot of talk about whether the movie would be in keeping with what makes Star Trek, well, Star Trek. Section 31, after all, does somewhat fly in the face of the idealized society that Gene Roddenberry proposed. But as we've seen from several series, DS9 in particular, stories that envelop that concept can be told in the world of Trek, and told well. After all, Roddenberry hypothesized a utopian-type future, but making the future possible might well require a fair measure of shenanigans within Starfleet, the Federation, and outside of both. So based on that premise, Section 31 has the ability to be a Trek movie. Dark? Yes. Reflecting a part of the Federation we would prefer wasn't there? Yes. But the reality behind Trek is that, through well-crafted storytelling and rich characters, we can confront aspects of our own culture through the eyes and actions of other races and other societies, and thereby re-examine ourselves and our world. Does that mean everyone's going to like it? Of course not. My son frequently reminds me that Trek is like ice cream. Not everyone likes the same flavors, but almost everyone likes some flavor. That doesn't mean it's good ice cream. Simply that some folks have other preferences than yours. But at the same time, and sticking with the ice cream metaphor here, just because something's kept in the ice cream freezer does not mean that it's ice cream. With that in mind, let's review Star Trek Section 31, and in doing so, let's consider a few basic questions. Is this Trek? By that, I mean, does it use rich storytelling set in a not-too-distant future that's close enough to ours that we can recognize ourselves, and yet has reached some level of societal development that we're striving for? Does it use complex and well-developed characters in which we can identify aspects of ourselves, or who we'd like to be, that lead us to examine ourselves through the eyes of someone from a different time or different race? Does it reach into the established universe to evoke a sense of familiarity, even while expanding it into new territories and new ideas? And if it's not Trek, then is it at least a good movie? Does it present a story that engages through a well-developed plot and uses characters that the audience identifies with, or against, in order to draw them into the universe on the screen, even if they are not familiar with those characters before the movie begins? Is the dialogue written to impart multiple layers of information to the audience, telling them about the character, the milieu, the story? Are the roles well acted? Is it directed thoughtfully and carefully, with careful editing and a soundtrack that enhances the scenes? In my opinion, and obviously people will disagree with me here, and if you do, please feel free to put your comments in the comments section, Star Trek Section 31 isn't. It isn't good Trek. It isn't even Trek. And worst of all, it's not even a good movie. Now, when I first started writing this review, I was going scene by scene, then realized I was drifting into Little Platoon's territory with a review that was longer than the movie. And while I love Little Platoon, I'll yield that level of detailed analysis to him. So let's break this down in a more general fashion. Good Trek, in my opinion, starts with good, well-developed characters who work with and off one another. And while Section 31 has one of these in Philippa Georgiou, one strong character is not enough to carry a whole movie. So that's it for richly crafted characters. And if you hadn't watched the first 3 seasons of Discovery, you wouldn't even have that. To help flesh out our understanding of Georgiou, however, and presumably to give the newbies an intro to her, The movie gives us an opening sequence that presents some of her backstory that we didn't know previously. And while the role of young Philippa is played quite well by actress Miku Martineau, it quickly becomes evident that it is less character backstory than it is future plot point. The remainder of our characters in this movie can be defined by their one sole characteristic. Our Section 31 team consists of Warhammer 40k dude, Deltan woman who is allegedly sexy AF, coked out Vulcan dude who is really a microscopic sentient lifeform driving a Vulcan bot, Cameloid Bernie Mac, who doesn't actually have a characteristic at all, and 24th century Miss Fisher. The team leader is Mysterious Good-Looking Guy. There are also several equally thinly written bad guys, but, to be honest, they are so peripheral to the plot that they are little more than place markers. Bad Guy 1 has mech-type implants and is annoying. Bad Guy 2 has severe facial scars, courtesy of Giorgio. Writers of Section 31, indeed writers everywhere, a characteristic is not a character. And because we have nothing more than that one characteristic to identify with, we just don't care about these people. Shortly after we meet the Section 31 team, we learn that 24th century Miss Fisher is actually Starfleet Lieutenant Rachel Garrett. She is there, allegedly, to prevent the team from murdering anyone. But let's be honest. She's really there because the writers wanted to insert a TNG Easter egg in the hope that it would get people to watch this movie. And it worked. Rachel Garrett is a great character in the TNG episode Yesterday's Enterprise, and a lot of people wanted to see some of her backstory. But we don't get that, however. Let's put an aside here. The Treaty of Catan says Starfleet cannot cross the boundary between the Federation space and the border territories. But Garrett's here. Why? The story had better give us a darned good reason for them to violate this critical treaty aside from her duties as babysitter. But they don't. The team gets together and spouts some, quote, witty banter, which seems to be the writer's attempt to grant them an Avengers-level type of camaraderie. And it just comes across as juvenile. Worse, it fails to demonstrate that they are a team, as there seems to be nothing more than resentment and anger between any of them. This isn't even a Misfits Suicide Squad team. It's just some random characters and bad dialogue. When Mel, the sexy AF Deltan, dies in the first fight, and help me, who trained these people to fight? I fight better than this. And Warhammer Guy dies a little later on. No one seems to care. We do get a little more backstory from some characters as the movie progresses, but it's darned little, and honestly, it adds nothing to make the plot more interesting. Team Leader Handsome was an augment and did bad things. Fuzz, the microscopic creature, is about to be a dad. And that's it. So that's it for rich characters. There is one at most, and nothing else of interest for us to grab onto. So let's try the plot. Is there a well-developed, complex, and/or interesting plot that captures the viewer's attention, drawing them into this universe, and ideally posing a moral question that the characters must solve for their own reasons, and our elucidation? No. Several people have compared Section 31 to a heist movie, or Mission Impossible, but it's neither. Heist movies like Ocean's 11 are complex, with multiple mini-storylines overlapping and underlapping, keeping the audience guessing until the climax, which is nothing we expected. Classic Mission Impossible brought together a select team of professionals with unique talents that were appropriate and focused on achieving a single mission objective. In the case of Star Trek Section 31, it's nothing more than a chase for a MacGuffin. So what is the MacGuffin? Well, we really aren't told, other than it's a thing that some terrorists want to get hold of, until Giorgio recognizes it as a device she had made that could do untold damage. But who told Section 31? How did we know it was going to be Giorgio's spacebar? And isn't it an amazing coincidence? We're never told. And why do we only have 24 hours to get it back? Again, we're never told. Well, we do know why there's a 24-hour period, and it has nothing to do with the plot. It's because giving an artificial time limit puts the viewer into a more heightened sense of engagement. The bomb is going to blow up in an hour. The heart for the transplant needs to be in the operating room in 40 minutes. The plane needs to get back to LaGuardia before the failing engines make it crash into the Hudson. But arbitrary time limits don't work as well in a science fiction show. Why? Well, I think Douglas Adams said it best. Space is big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the road to the chemists, but that's just peanuts to space. And you may be asking yourself, but what does space have to do with time? Everything, because, as Douglas Adams said, space is big. If everything that happens has to happen within 24 hours, or as we're told later, within 4 hours, that almost totally precludes the use of space travel. Whatever's going to happen is going to have to happen here, or somewhere really close. As I had nothing better to do, and it was a reason not to write this review, I did some rough calculations. If the team has 24 hours, the absolute maximum distance they can travel is, roughly, 16 billion miles, and that's assuming warp 9. With a 4-hour limitation, they have 2.6 billion miles that they can travel. Now that may sound like a lot, but it's really not. If you are traveling out from Earth, 16 billion miles is still within the Earth's solar system, and 2.6 billion miles gets you to Neptune, but no further. So if our team thinks that they are going to get to some significantly distant place to save the galaxy, they are wrong. Add to this that during this time period they also have to find the mole and fix the ship first in that same time period, and therefore they end with almost no time. And if the idea is they need to travel to the Crescent Nebula where the portal is located, well, let me do a little spoiling here. Checking out the maps in the show and comparing them to star maps in real life and on Star Trek Online, I've made some very rough calculations. The distance from the Crescent Nebula to Giorgio's station, as located on the map on the screen that they made, is 1,132.09 days at warp 9, give or take. That's a little over 3 years. And bear in mind, this means that Data No, uninteresting bad guy number 1, also needed those same 3 years to get to the station. There are a few other science kerfluffles that also irked me. The Acheron goes nose down on the planet to honor the new emperor in the opening sequence, completely disregarding the catastrophic atmospheric disruption that should have caused. Starships aren't made to work in a planet's gravity well. We have to ignore the issue of deceleration, as well as the issue of structural integrity, inertial dampeners, and internal gravity now being 90 degrees off of what it was a few minutes before. It looks pretty, but it's not feasible. We'll ignore the issue of the little phase generators that Giorgio uses. Technically, she and the device should fall through the floors, but they didn't in the TNG episode, The Next Phase, so we're going to have to give that one a pass. She also shouldn't be able to breathe, since the oxygen would also be out of phase as well, but hey, let's not let logic get in the way here. On the positive side, I love the space station spaceship that's Giorgio's base of operations. It's beautiful on the exterior and interior, and if it were equipped with some nice weaponry, I'd love to fly it in Star Trek Online. Hey, stow devs and ship designers, can we get that space station ship, please? But it's only one of a few high points in the movie. There are fails on technical levels as well. There are lots of rapid edits that keep us from being able to focus in on a single character's face, making it harder to try and engage with them on an emotional level. Fight scenes are blurred due to the phase shifting. Now, come on, it's Michelle Yeoh, for crying out loud. I want to see her fight, but all we get from her are a few decent blocks and one solid kick, and the rest could be a stunt double for all I can tell. The use of annoying little cards between the scenes. The discrepancies in the scenes, like in the beginning scene on Terran Earth, where the family farm and forge are in literal tatters, but the clothing the people are wearing is immaculate and undamaged and machine-made for that point, and their skin is clean and flawless and they look healthy. The father is operating a forge, and the mother is cooking over a raging fire. But there aren't any nearby trees. Yes, there are some way off in the distance. The singer in the bar sounds lovely, but she's gyrating like crazy. Have you ever tried to sing and dance at the same time? And her outfit smacks of the diva Plava Laguna in The Fifth Element. Just saying. And the music is definitely dated. The background music sounds very 21st century, with no suggestion of either off-worldliness or being from the future, and it keeps the viewer from becoming further immersed in the scenes. The lighting is dark. The costumes are generally dark. And I know that's the trend, but I want to see what's happening, not guess at it. There's an inherent issue with the dialogue as well, and it fallbacks to the problem with the script. The movie uses title cards and interstitial to dump exposition on us. Sometimes the characters do the same, and it's always very disruptive. The old axiom of show, don't tell can be difficult to do, so if you have to have your characters drop exposition, you need to make it natural or inferred. You can't just have them spout a paragraph of how something happened or why they're here or whatever. This needs to be woven into the body of the film, and sometimes you just have to not tell the audience. Let them figure it out. And by the way, don't use dated terms in the dialogue. Michelle Yeoh describes something as meh. There's a reference to a Swiss Army knife, something being on the radar, coloring within the lines, someone saying how very on-brand of you. And while we're at it, having your characters saying shit does not make them sound badass or interesting. Unless you're 13 years old. Which, sorry about this, people who were involved in making Section 31, is what this movie feels like. A bunch of 8th graders got together, wrote a Star Trek fanfic that they thought was cool, got some friends to act in it, and made a homemade film out of it. And if that is the case, well, they did a great job for a bunch of 13-year-olds. These were professional writers, actors, directors, editors, and producers who had years to make a great movie that would help reinvigorate the franchise. And they failed. Section 31 is a fail. I wanted to like it. I really did. I wanted a Rachel Garrett backstory. I wanted a tale that showed a dark, behind-the-scenes aspect to Trek that might have been counter to the Trek we know, but was still good. This ain't it. And that's the disappointing part. Star Trek has a fan base of millions of people stretching back almost 60 years. When a creator wants to tell a story in this universe, they need to respect that origin and those fans, even when trying to push the boundaries of the universe into new directions. Many Trekkies will resist these newer approaches, but the reality is that if it's well crafted, well executed, we will come to appreciate it, even if it's not our preferred flavor. We will not, however, accept something just because it has Star Trek stamped on the label. We're fans, and yes, we're nerds, and yes, some of us don't have lives. But we're not stupid, and we're not sheep. If Paramount wants to keep this franchise alive and prospering, they're going to need to recognize that, and treat us with the same respect we give Trek. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening.